Welcome to another Sunday morning, our second in December. Here we are on the 11th already for our Sunday school class where we are looking at the age of the patriarchs. So share screen here to get our day going. Before we get to the lesson plan, I thought I would share with you all the latest and greatest from our good friend, Brother Mike Maney. Here is the work he has done on the logo for us, incorporating our dove that we had sent to him. And so he is actually, as we speak, working on a temporary website incorporating this logo for us to review and see what we think. So I wanted to share the update with the church. And so we are making progress. What do you think? And we can play with different color schemes and whatnot, but
if I could just
Oh,
add a
please.
little bit to that. So he had sent one originally, and I told Eric, oh, no. This is much better. Let me put it that way. So I did ask Eric if he could have Brother Maney tweak it a little bit. He was not able to get like a picture, like how we were talking about, the picture. And I didn't, quite understand, all the details and technical things of it, but I think this is beautiful. I think this is beautiful. And yeah, if we want to tweak it with the colors, we can obviously tweak it with the colors.
And real quick with that, and this is why we have people who are more expert in the field than certainly I am, with the idea of marketing, branding, and logos, you don't want it too busy. You want something that's simple enough that's easily implanted. And so the photo has too many details and different things going on. And we can have the photo on the webpage, of course, and things like that. But as far as a logo that's kind of attached everywhere, that our name is, that's something that kind of implants in the eyes and the brain and is more memorable. Brother Clay.
Was this intentional or unintentional that the bird is actually opposite?
I don't know about as far as going up versus down. We could have it turned so that it goes down. This was something that he sent with what he was wanting to do in lieu of what we were thinking with the photograph. Yeah, so that's definitely something I can mention to him, because the point was that Christ's baptism, the dove descended upon Christ. So yeah, good point, Sister Minnie. All righty, good to know.
The white hats and white horse, rather than black hats and white.
Yeah.
And I even told Eric.
Not thinking of Westerns.
I mean, we're being like so picky. We're like, oh, you do whatever, Brother Maney, but what about blue?
Yeah.
A blue or yellow? A blue background with a gold cross.
See, now I'm flashing back to the end.
You like the red cross?
I don't like that.
No, I don't like that.
Oh,
you don't like the red cross? Okay.
Okay.
So, yeah. So
maybe, take note, sister.
And I agree with the white dove.
Okay, so white dove is good.
Yeah.
Was it like a yellow background?
Wait, it is the blue and white is the Christian flag.
Oh, there we go. There we go. So blue cross.
So if we do white dove on white background, then
You won't see it.
Then we could do a gold background.
A gold or yellow.
Gold or yellow background.
Yeah.
It's yellow, right? So you can see it.
Yeah.
See, now I'm flashing back to the season 2 finale of The Chosen, where the women, hey, but Jesus, before your great Sermon on the Mount, here, how about this color cloak, that color cloak? This color represents this and that.
A white dove, a blue cross, and then a yellow background.
Okay, jot that down for me and I'll.
Got it.
Cool. So wanted to share.
But thank you, Brother Maney.
But thank you. Oh, but thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Brother Maney.
Yes.
That will give you an idea, yeah.
So there's a sneak peek. Yes.
The running bear.
Oh, Diana had something.
Apple dumpling gang. Apple dumpling
Did
gang.
they put it in there?
No, what?
Diana has something.
I'm sorry. Yes, Diana.
Oh, I didn't mean to.
No, you're fine.
No.
We don't seem to have a Christian flag in the room.
Amen.
But I believe it is white and blue and the cross is red. I don't have my phone. So look it up.
Yeah. There's a different history to the Christian flag. That we'll say for another time.
Christian flag, I'll show you.
Yeah.
I agree
appreciate the cross being red because of blood of Christ, and I appreciate the dove being white, so that's all I'm gonna say about that.
We can make it work with the
Well,
different colors,
what we
yeah.
can do is we can have them do the different ones that.
Yeah,
like,
and then we'll vote on
and
one
then
that
we
we,
can-
yeah.
Yeah, and then we can decide, once we see, because it's easy to talk about it, once we
Yeah.
see it, we might be like, oh, no, that didn't look like I wanted it to. look.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yes.
It's got white,
Yes.
red.
Oh, it does have a, Diana's right, it does have
Does have the red
a
flag.
Yeah.
flag on it. Good.
It's the blue flag and the red
Right
flag.
flag.
That one?
see, I'm glad when my family arrived at this church, y'all already had songbooks that had their own color. Y'all already had flooring that had its own color, so we didn't have to be a part of any of those discussions.
Yeah, because I would have, this would have been red. Not blue, it's black. She's right. But I like the red one.
So moving right along,
Yeah, here it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Fringe. See, it's fringed, it's fringed.
It's fringed and gold.
Yeah, it's fringed. Oh, yeah, no.
That's what he was doing, so it's.
alrighty, so moving right along, we in our actual Sunday school class discussion are going through the age of the patriarchs. Of course, the Bible is our first and foremost primary reference and authority, and we are looking for some background info to Egyptologist David Roll and his new chronology, where he corrects some errors in the mainstream timeline, and they end up falling right in line with the Bible that never had to change, of course. So with that, we have arrived at the year 1751 BC. We are in the Middle Bronze Age. And so a quick recap of the status of things in the world right now. We have over in China, their early dynasty, the Xia dynasty. Over here in the capital city of Anyang, we have Emperor Jin ruling over them there at this point in time. There in China. We have over in Egypt, the Pharaoh Senuseret I, whose father Amenemhat I had recently been assassinated. So he has now assumed the throne. He is of the 12th dynasty in Egypt's Middle Kingdom. So he is ruling at this time. Over in the young nation of Assyria, we have in their capital city of Assur, we have a king, looks to be Erisum, is the king of Assyria and their current capital of Assur. And here it is right off of the Tigris River right there. So it's the ruins of what's left there to be seen today. There's Mosul a little further north where Nineveh's remains are. Euphrates off to the side there. So there's that in the grand scheme of things. Over further south in Mesopotamia, after the III dynasty fell, we have the breakaway city of Isin being led by their king, who is currently King Isin-Dagan, ruling right here in the city-state of Isin. And that's all that remains of it at this point in time. Also in this land of Mesopotamia, Sumer, Shinar, land between the two rivers, Euphrates and the Tigris rivers, we have another city-state of Larsa, just a little further south of Isin. And that is currently being led by King Erisum. So that's all there is to see for Larsa today. Not much remains of what once were fairly greater city-states with their kings and territories and all that. Of course, Egypt all over there. So 1751 BC, Ishmael is 114 years old. Isaac is 100 years old. And Esau and Jacob, the twins, are 40 years old, which brings us to Genesis chapter 26.
Yeah, I have a question.
Fire away.
It kind of does tie into the devotional, so I don't
Right
want
on.
to go too far off track, but in the devotional, okay, because we talk about kings and
Yep.
all these things, and then obviously, the Lord is our king. So you don't kind of see that hierarchy, right, amongst the Jewish people, that kind of thing. But then here also in your devotional, when it's talking about the whole 70 weeks thing, and it talks about the prince who is to come.
Mhm.
So is it that we don't have, Jesus is the one king, but then the world is allowed to have all these kings and princesses. We've been watching The Crown too on Netflix. And I told Eric, I said, all them people need to go get a job. They got too much time on their hands. But
We're up to 1957 now.
yeah, we're up to 1957, yeah. But just the whole thing of king and prince
Yeah.
and princesses and then, I mean, the prince to come, they're talking about Antichrist, right? I mean, that's what that is. So it just kind of struck me, but yet we don't see that in, you know, these people that were studying, you know, our ancestors, Jews,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
Israelites. Thank you, Mr. Trinity.
Right now, great question. So what is the deal with all these other nations having their kings? And we know Jesus is the Prince of Peace. We know this Antichrist being inspired by Satan, you know, Prince of Darkness and all these things and all those. So there's actually some debate on the technicality of those verses, which verses are talking about Jesus, which ones are talking about the Antichrist. But yeah, it feels fairly straightforward to me in the context and compared with other scriptures. But anyway, as far as the Lord's own people having a king, at the time we are looking at right now, the age of the patriarchs, this is before Israel has any king. Later on, we know they would have kings. Actually, during the time of Judges, they tried to make Gideon king. And he says, no, God's our king. Good answer, Gideon. His son Abimelech says, I'll take that. And so he actually gets made king, technically the first king. Now, probably just over the tribal area, wasn't over the whole nation. And that lasted for 3 years till a woman dropped a stone on him and he died, but we'll get to all that. And so the nation of Israel started to realize that they were getting overlooked because they weren't like all the other nations that had their kings to represent them in foreign affairs and all that stuff. So they said, we want to be like the other nations. And so they told the prophet Samuel, you're old, your sons are worthless, and you know, this ain't working out. We want a king. Samuel says the same thing that Gideon had said, you've got a king. And they said, yeah, no, but we want. And so God says, hey, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. And so God chooses their king, King Saul, who could have been a good king and had potential, but went his own way. And then we got David and everything from that. So you're right, Sister Ashley, we don't have a king during this time, and we don't need a king like the nations seem to do, because God's our king and it's his rule and law that we are obeying. Keep in mind, no scriptures have been written yet. This is all being led by their own relationship with God.
So who was the first king that served the Lord? Because we have King David, obviously.
King Saul was technically the first king of the Lord's people, of the United Nation of Israel.
Okay.
And so that would be him technically, and he did some things right. But as we see with both David after him and other kings, and even the split of the kingdom after Solomon to the 10 tribes of the north and the 2 tribes in the south into 2 different nations, there's a mixed bag. Israel, after the split, never had a good king. And Judah in the south, with the capital Jerusalem that Daniel was praying over, Jerusalem was the descendants of David, was a mixed bag. Some were good, some were bad. Quite often a good father would have a bad son, and then vice versa. I think there are only like 2 occasions where you have a good father and a good son succeed him. Asa and Jehoshaphat is one example of that. But yeah, so long answer to your question, there was no need for a king. This was not the time of all that. And when God had Saul and especially David afterwards, the point was, just like the sacrifices, to be pointing to Christ as the ultimate King of Kings and Lord of Lords. But that gets
Doesn't
missed.
just man's need to be led or to follow something or someone in authority? Is that just deeply inherent?
We need someone to look to be the responsible one, because we don't want to be responsible for ourselves, and we also want someone to blame. That's not us. We don't want the responsibility. We don't want the blame. So
But
yeah.
also you touched earlier also, foreign affairs are best conducted by an earthly king. I mean, seems more
Right.
Yeah. So like Anthony Eden as prime minister, we saw in the show.
Somebody told me years ago, a Christian man, he said, there are 2 types of people in the world. leaders and followers.
Mm-hmm.
I think this comes, with their personalities and
Oh, yeah.
temperaments and that kind of thing. They're always going to be people who are peaceful. They're ready to follow. They're always going to be those who are even like in sheep and cattle. There's always one who's out ahead of the rest of them.
And so amongst the Lord's people, that's a great point, Sister Minnie. So amongst the Lord's people, we can have, it's okay for someone to have a desire to serve and fill in a gap and provide a service, but it has to be done in full humility and surrender to God's will above self-will. The problem is, even in the Lord's people throughout Scripture, even in the churches through today, people have their own human agendas and want to be, in their humanity, they want to be leaders. And it's not a case of what's classically called in the business world servant leadership, with Christ being the model, where you lead by serving. You lead by, just like John the Baptist led the way for Christ, by serving, by clearing the way, by making the rough ways smooth and things like that, by rolling up your sleeves and getting under people and lifting them up so that the way is clear between them and Christ. That's what a leader is supposed to be in that service role, and humanity gets it backwards. And so we tend to elevate leaders when Christ says no, true leaders elevate the people they're leading.
That's what I was just thinking about, because when you just see over time, when you put someone into that position, with that comes abuse of power. Something had popped into my brain this morning because my brain's all over the place, but I was just thinking about how there have been people in my family that were just mean. And I don't know how else to say it, but these were just mean people. They're the kind of people that, if they're walking down the street and saw a dog, they'd kick it. Or if they had a chance to pinch a baby, they'd pinch it. Or abuse, the elderly. I was just thinking about that, and seemingly no conscience of this. And obviously we see some of that with the kings, on such a greater scale. So it's hard for me when we talk about the example that Christ is supposed to set, and we want our leaders, that's just why we pray for our country, right?
Amen.
We want our leaders to have a heart after Christ. But then it just seems like some of these people in these positions are mean.
Mm-hmm.
They're just mean, and then they think that they know what's best for those that are subservient to them, or that they're over, these positions of power, and it just strikes me because the Bible talks about the Lord allows certain ones to be raised and, all this stuff. So we know nothing goes without him or his awareness or his, part in it to make something wonderful of it. But just that thinking about human nature, it just almost seems like it is something that is just destined to fail.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's just
Apart from God, yes.
Yeah, it's just anything like that. Because you even see it in the church.
Oh yeah.
Right? You see men that are elevated in the church, and we talk about these men, certain men. I'm not, being negative, but just we talk about these men, and we always say don't put pastors on pedestals, right?
Amen.
And because then when they disappoint, or
Yes.
when they have this human moment and then they fall, it can devastate congregations. It can just devastate congregations. So
Or lead them astray, Jeremiah. Right?
yes,
Yeah.
right, yeah, or lead them astray. Absolutely, Sister Minnie. So yeah, it just seems like, it seems like it's human nature, but then it seems like, well, Lord, could you thought of something else?
That dang free will.
I know that dang, free will. Yeah.
Well, it's been said before, recognizing we're all sinners, I want as few sinners in charge of me as possible. And therefore, a limited government. And so that's one of the contradictions about this whole concept is that, well, if people are messed up, then who are you going to put in charge of them? A messed up person? If we're all messed up, we all have our flaws and shortcomings. If man is the problem, then man can't be the answer. And so, but you always have men willing to step in and say, I'll lead you out. I'll be the hero. I'll be just do what I say. And we'll actually talk this coming Wednesday night about a little more about the current Tower of Babel of man that is being constructed and taking advantage of current circumstances, and how that's just bringing us, closer to Daniel 9:25 and what's going to be brought out there. So yeah, it's good stuff to talk about, be aware of. So while all these other kings are in these other places, we are with Isaac at 100 years old, Esau and Jacob, the twin sons, at 40 years old. In Genesis 26, the end of the chapter, verses 34 and 35, we see what's happening in their lives. So Genesis 26:34, when Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. And they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah. Hittites are foreigners to the patriarchs. Hittites are those that are outsiders. And throughout the Old Testament and New Testament, one of many consistent themes is not marrying outside the faith. Isaac knows firsthand. His dad's servant Eliezer went over to find Rebekah for him out of their own family and people, and not to be married to the foreigners serving their own foreign gods that we've seen are aplenty, and be distracted by that. So rightfully so, Isaac and Rebekah are heartbroken over Esau's polygamy and marriage to two wives here that are Hittites. And it's not going to be a good thing.
Not only that, they're going to raise their children.
Right.
They thought they were raised.
Marriage counseling 101. Okay. Where are you at with children and how they're going to be raised, and religion and faith and your different spiritual backgrounds. How are you going to come together on this? Those are important things to be aware of, and the impact and influence. Absolutely. So that was 1751 BC. Next year, as I had mentioned before, it seemed there was an adjustment to the timeline for China. It turns out it was just a contradiction that I had to correct my correction. So we're back to normal. So someone I had mentioned earlier is actually just now becoming emperor back over here in Anyang, China. And that is Emperor Kongjia. So he's emperor, he's king. So I like saying King Kongjia because I get to say King Kong in Sunday school. Doesn't happen too often. So I know I shared this story before, but it's such a fun story. I want to share it again, refresh our memories. He's the son of King Bujiang. His uncle was King Xiang. He had many beautiful concubines. So as Sister Diana had mentioned a little while back, this whole concubine thing was throughout and including places like China. It was a prevalent thing. So in a writing known as the Grand Historian, King Kongjia didn't get the throne from his father, the 11th king of the Xia dynasty, because of him being superstitious and absurd. So after his father died, his uncle, and then his cousin, became the 12th and 13th kings of the Xia kingdom. When they all died, Kongjia finally ascended to the throne, became the 14th king of his country. He loved the supernatural, and following his example, talk about the influence of leaders, there were soon many so-called witches. The entire population turned to prayers and oracles instead of working. Some years later, a celestial, a being from the heavens, this is in their grand historian mythology here, this celestial gave King Kongjia 2 dragons, but they were torpid or lazy and ill-looking. So Kongjia, in an effort to please them, had a pagoda and a lake built for them, but sick they remained. At length, there came a man who said he knew what to do. He had 28 men stand in the shapes of the constellations and wave huge white flags to imitate the clouds. He set gunpowder in place of thunder, firecrackers for lightning. He also had men churn the water of the lake so the waves leapt high. When he gave his signal, the thunder rumbled. Lightning flashed, the clouds waved and water foamed. The dragons, fancying themselves in the heavens again, jumped into the water. However, he accidentally killed one dragon and didn't know how to deal with the dragon's body. So he made it a delicious meal and provided it to Kongjia. Yeah. After this horrible behavior was found out, the person ran away with his whole family. The second dragon keeper was very straightforward. Cool. But that displeased Kongjia many times. So he was sentenced to death. and poorly buried outside of the capital city there, Anyang. After this, there were terrible storms and fires, which Kangjia believed to be caused by the spirit of the dead keeper. He and his witches made many magics and prayers, but on the way home, Kangjia was so scared, he actually died of fear. And so that is the mythology of China's emperor king Kangjia of the Xia dynasty at this time of Isaac and Esau and Jacob. So yeah, there's that. Now, the next event around the same time frame brings us to a place we haven't been in a long time. And this is, actually, I could just hit the next button here. The Indus Valley, the Indus River Valley. Back in the days, even before the flood, trade had spread out here with, there was Adam, there was Cain, Cain's son Enoch. Cain's sons Enoch, went down and did a lot of expanding and trading. And so we have this area, here's Afghanistan, here's Pakistan, this area of green here outside all the brown, or in between all this brown. This is the Indus River Valley civilization. Some very famous ancient cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro are early culture civilizations. Well, about this time in 1750 BC or so, this society and civilization is now starting to decline during the time of Esau and Jacob. But I figured we'd take a quick look just to see something a little different from Middle Eastern deserts and all that. The deepest canyon in the world is here. The Indus Gorge. Over here in the Pakistan area. Map. There's a panoramic view. Map. There's some more stuff. Picture from 1905.
Eric, when we talk about the way oh my gosh, how things used to look.
Yeah.
They were green before they became desert.
Yeah.
Climate change.
Yeah.
Right?
Recovering from the flood.
Right, recovering from the flood, thank you. When we see these places, and it's wonderful that we're getting to look at things that we probably will never ever normally see in our lives thanks to the internet. Do you think that it's reasonable then when they start talking about, things like quote unquote climate change, that we're just in another, like I say, we're in that recovery, so things are changing? Things are, obviously, if before the Central Valley was wet, was a lake. Now
There actually was a Kauai Delta,
yeah, right. Now it's not. That's just a natural
Mineralization.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's not wrong to say that the climate is changing, and the Bible speaks to this too, right?
What's wrong to say is it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And that it's harmful, and that harm is coming from it. Oh my goodness, carbon dioxide. Oh my gosh, this carbon in the air. My reaction is, oh, you mean that thing that plants breathe?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, all of and there was right after we went through in Sunday school, the flood and the ice age, I went through a whole litany of all of these doomsday climate change prophecies going back from the 60s forward that said in 10 years, everything's going to be toast. And it just never happened. All these, it's climate hysteria has been wrong 100% time. 100% of the time. They have a perfect track record. And so that is not science. In fact, that is scientific evidence that it is all bunk, and it's a means to an end. It's an effort to assert leadership and control. You guys, it's to create a panic and fear. So let me step in as the leader and let me tax and punish and accumulate power and authority, and we'll do things my way. And it's just another means to another Tower of Babel, part of the Great Reset and all that, political garbage. But the climate is naturally changing. The one and only ice age that lasted for 500 years after the flood, so 100 years after the Tower of Babel, we are seeing the glaciers are melting. Yeah, back to normal, because all of that is accumulation from the flood waters freezing up there. Yeah, please.
In 1969, I took a night class in science, the science teacher assured us, that we were headed for another ice age. We were going into an ice age in 1969.
Yep.
Didn't happen.
Nope.
Now they say, oh, global warming.
I'm sorry. Is it?
They changed to
Yeah.
climate change because nobody believed global warming.
Because they couldn't keep it straight. It was the problem that we're getting too hot or getting too cold. They couldn't keep it straight. So yeah, it's all bunk and none of it is science-based. Here's what you never want to hear. The scientists say. I don't give a hill of beans what the scientists say. What does the science say? Show me the science. And the whole point of science is it's not, oh, the science is settled. No. If it's settled, then it's transparent and anyone can come along and go through the scientific method and test it. And if you're right, they'll get the same result every time.
Just like math.
Just like math.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 + 2 will always equal 4. I don't care how you try to manipulate and sideways it. And so plain and simple godly truth robs man of his excuses for dethroning God and claiming power for himself. And
Well, it actually
Yeah.
says in the Bible, you know,
Yeah.
that as long as the earth endures, there's going to be springtime. and
Yeah.
harvest. There's always going to be springtime and harvest.
that was part of the promise in Genesis 9, I believe it was. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not wrong to tell somebody it's pretty arrogant to say man. Man cannot destroy what God created.
Right, good luck. Can man harm the planet with pollution and things like that? Obviously, of course, and we are to be good stewards of the earth. Do you know the word conservation begins with conserve, like conservative? That's where it all kind of comes from. And so we are to be responsible, good stewards of what God has blessed us with. But to Brother Clay's excellent point, there is no amount of damage, whether nuclear bombs or whatever, that we could do to this planet or have done to this planet that compares with the natural destruction of volcanic activity and things like that. There have been volcanic explosions that are like so many, I don't have the numbers in front of me offhand, but that the explosive power of them is like a nuclear bomb to the X to the X to the X. So much greater natural destructive power than anything man has come up with, and yet the earth heals and recovers. And constantly and
People
faithfully.
forget, well, not forget, but I mean, God made the earth for our habitation, for us. We're not overpopulated, despite what they'll
Nope.
tell you. You know, we're not, 12 years to the end of the world, or
Right.
whatever it was that ridiculous girl said at the time.
Yes.
God made this earth for us and to be populated. And it doesn't just seem so silly to me. And I agree with Eric. I recycle, right? I want to take care of the earth,
And get my $12 or whatever.
but don't you tell me, don't you tell me that I have to, or I'm killing all little, birds in the, that come on my house, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that does get under my skin is they want to stick us in cities and pile us on top of each other and have us live in squalor, basically.
Yes.
When
Under their control.
when you see all this government land where there's just nothing sitting on it, right? So same thing, okay, stop, I don't like soapbox, sorry. I was getting ready to go another place, but anyway, so yeah, I just have to I always remind myself that the Lord created the earth for us and for us to populate.
All these people crying climate change or flying their gas guzzling jets to these climate conferences. They're so worried about the oceans rising that they're spending millions of dollars on oceanfront property. Yeah.
And we ran out of diesel.
Yeah.
That's where it hits home.
That's why you're still here.
That was supposed to.
Oh, yeah,
a month or so
the
ago,
diesel
13 years
shortage,
ago.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just
Yeah.
Like I said, Thanksgiving, it's that you scare people with chicken little.
Mhm.
Tyranny of fear.
Yes. Well said.
Tyranny of fear.
Well said.
I was like, all these people wearing masks and stuff again, like going to the parking lot to go to shopping carts. Guess where I find the mask at when they do the store? All over the ground.
All over the
parking lot.
ground, right?
Yep.
Right. That's, yeah, that, yeah.
That irks me beyond anything, because if they really think that that is contaminated, just throw it on the ground.
That's a biohazard.
That's how I see it, and I'm like, you can't really be too afraid of the germ and bacteria, but if you can walk outside and throw it on the ground and you don't think anyone else, is gonna spread, it's like, where's your thinking?
Well, my thing is, show me that you believe what you're spouting before you try to persuade and convince me.
Yeah.
And convert me. So over here in the exciting city-state of Larsa there, we have a new king named Samuum in 1749 BC. Shortly thereafter, 1745 BC, while Senuseret I is still king on the throne in Egypt, learning from what happened with his dad, he starts the trend of having his son co-reign with him. So there can be a smooth transition from one to the next. And his son is Amenemhat II, who is now co-reigning with him. And will do so for the next 16 years or so. So as time is moving along, let's take a quick look at just a couple verses. At Abraham's third wife, Keturah, two of them had kids. We've looked at that generation. Well, now moving on in time, we have the next generation. They're mentioned in First Chronicles. You can hold your place in Genesis. First Chronicles chapter 1. Samuel Kings Chronicles. First Chronicles chapter 1, the end of verse 32, the end of verse 33. So First Chronicles 1:32, this next generation, Abraham's grandkids with Keturah. Sons of Jokshan were Sheba and Dedan. Sons of Midian were Ephah, Epher, Hanok, Abida, and Eldah. All these were the sons of Keturah. And those verses are echoed in verses like Genesis 25, verse 3, which mentions Jokshan became the father of Sheba and Dedan. And verse 4, sons of Midian were Ephah and Epher and Hanok and Abida and Eldah. All these were the sons of Keturah. So there is that. Now, as we continue to move on in time, we have a new king in Assyria. Over here, back in their capital of Assur. 46, there we go. And this king's name is Erisum I. His name means he has desired. So what goes on? Again, there are the ruins of Assur, first capital of Assyria along the Tigris River. So what goes on during his reign as king? This is right out of Wikipedia, some simple, straightforward stuff. As Ashur's merchant family firms vigorously pursued commercial expansion, Erisum I had established distant trading outposts in Anatolia that are referred to as Karims. So from here, he's actually got trade expanding all the way out to Anatolia, which is what we in modern times understand to be Greece and Turkey. So here he is, go away. So he is here having trade all the way with Greece and Turkey over here, to the benefit of his people who are having their family firms that are wanting to expand their trading outposts. So they have trading outposts that are called Karums. They're along all the trade routes into Turkey, including cities like Kanesh, Ankua, Hattusa, so dealing with the Hittites kind of, and 18 other locations that we still haven't found yet. They trade in tin, textiles, lapis lazuli, iron, antimony, copper, bronze, wool, grain, and they swap those out for gold and silver. Now, we actually have some of the writings of King Erisum I of Assyria. Here are some things that he had to say in his inscription. The one who talks too much in the step gate, the demon of ruins will seize his mouth and his hindquarters. He will smash his head like a shattered pot. He will fall like a broken reed, and water will flow from his mouth. The one who talks too much in the step gate, his house will become a house of ruin. He who rises to give false testimony, may the 7 judges who decide legal cases in the step gate give a false decision against him. May, he refers to these gods here, may Ashur, Adad, and Bel, a version of Baal, my God, pluck his seed. A place may they not give to him. So he felt pretty strongly about that. Yeah. A lot of inscriptions from around his time talk about his building the temple for the god Ashur, called the Wild Bull, has a courtyard and 2 beer vats, and the accompanying curses for anyone who would use them for their intended purposes. Don't just use these beer vats for beer. This is for worship of our God here. Other things he was involved in: Temple of Ishtar and that of Adad. He used eminent domain to clear an area from the sheep gate to the people's gate, make way for enlarging the city wall so that he could brag, I made a higher wall than the wall my father had constructed. So you got to be known for something, right? So that is Erisum I of Assyria and his claims to fame. Brings us to 1731 BC. New king over in Isin, named Ishme-Dagan. So here's the new king of Isin, Ishme-Dagan, some stuff dealing with him. This is a stamped brick with his name on it here, in case you couldn't tell. Ishme-Dagan, king of Isin, during the period of Isin and Larsa, that's from the city of He was the son and successor of the former king Isin-Dagan. So that's that guy. And next we have in 1730 BC, the death of Pharaoh Senuseret I, leaving his son Amenemhat II to rule alone in Egypt. So here we have Amenemhat II, now the sole king over the land of Egypt in their 12th dynasty. So here's what we've got on Amenemhat II. Necklace of his princess daughter. Well, that was kind of pretty. His title is on a box here. Okay, we're actually going to talk about that. This is a good example. He's named on these boxes of this treasure of silver objects that were found further away. A lot of these objects are not Egyptian workmanship, but Aegean from the Greek islands, showing they had their contact between Egypt and other civilizations during this time. There's a design of his pyramid, which we'll get to that. So let's get to that. His pyramid is called the White Pyramid. So let's zoom in and see the exciting White Pyramid. Are we there yet? Yeah, I'll see that, right?
Sure.
Yeah. There's a better look. The White Pyramid is now nothing more than a pile of rubble, having been heavily quarried for stone. The remaining limestone rubble has given rise to the modern name, the White Pyramid. A full-scale investigation into the whole complex still has yet to be undertaken. So that is it for Amenemhat II of Egypt's 12th dynasty, ruling over United Egypt in the Middle Kingdom period. So a lot of grave robbing, absolutely. One other item of interest, the book of Numbers tells us that it's about this time that the city of Hebron is fortified. This would be about 1730 BC. And the tomb of Abraham and Sarah right there. So here's Hebron, Jerusalem over here, Bethel up there, all that stuff, which we'll get to as we go. So yeah, Hebron gets strengthened around this time. And this now brings us to the death of Ishmael. Let's close in Genesis 25. This will be some interesting stuff. So Genesis 25, we are now in the year 1728 BC. So Genesis 25, pick it up. Genesis 25, here we go. Verses 17 and 18. Genesis 25, 17, 18. These are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years. And he breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people. They settled from Havilah to Shur, which faces Egypt as one goes toward Assyria. He settled in defiance of all his relatives. Now your Bibles may say east of Egypt. We're going to talk about that and the difference there and the significance of that. And why am I looking at a picture of Mount Seir here? So at the death of Ishmael, 137 years old, Isaac is now 123 years old. Ishmael's brother, Isaac, Ishmael's nephews, Esau and Jacob, are now 63 years old. So we are actually going to pick up next week with the connection between Ishmael and Esau and the Mount Seir connection and these people that the nation of Israel will be dealing with as they leave Egypt and have to go on from there, and how the connection between Ishmael and Esau. It's kind of interesting. During Bible times, it was the descendants of Esau that were more of a thorn in their side. Since the Bible times, it's been the descendants of Ishmael with the Arab nations and all of that have been more of a thorn in their side. So we'll see their dynamic and their connection and what this has to do with Mount Seir when we pick up next week. So pausing there for this morning, does anyone have any other observations or questions or thoughts at these things we've looked at, Sister Minnie? Yeah, please.
Here it says, in verse 18, and he was, on the 17th, and was gathered unto his people. Is this talking physically, is buried where his family was buried? Or are we taking it to mean that when we die, we are spirit turns to God, that our families are?
Great question. So that phrase, gather to his people, that is not a spiritual connotation. That is actually a cultural, physical connotation where the body is brought to a place and the people actually gather to the body. And so there's a coming together for the memorial and the burial and things like that. So that's the gathering, because how do you gather one person? He's already together, you hope. So the idea is the coming together of the people with the body. So
Well, I know that, David, in the city of David, kings were buried there. You had to be someone that was approved. to be buried.
exactly. In fact, we have a famous story of King Joash, who was king at age 7 after murdering Grandma Queen Athaliah. And so the priest that raised him, Jehoiada, King Joash was a good king until the priest that raised him, Jehoiada, died. Then he got corrupted by his buddies, and he ended up killing Jehoiada's own son, Zechariah, who was prophesying against the evil things he was doing. It got so bad that when he was killed by his own servants, Jehoash, and then we have the book of Joel shortly after that, that the king, Joash, it was decreed he would not be buried with the rest of the kings. But the priest, Jehoiada, who was a good guy, he would be buried with the kings. So yeah, so you're right. So that significance, the being where you're being gathered to. So I'm really glad you brought that up. So we will look next week to the Ishmaelites and connection to the Esau, Edomites, and Mount Seir and all of that, picking up next week. So stop our share, stop recording, and get ready for our song.